And MEF is best known for standardizing and commercializing carrier Ethernet technologies that we all use. But on top of that, MEF is also moving in a number of new forward-looking directions driven by the digital transformation of telecommunications, which is very appropriate to our topic today on edge computing. So what we intend to cover in the next 40 minutes is a broad brush overview of some of the opportunities that our distinguished panelists are pursuing with regard to edge computing, which is very complementary to some of the other, not just connectivity, but going into this new digital world of telecommunications where we have the cloud is looming large, not to mention security becomes even more critical than it already has. It's always been critical, it's always top of mind, especially for our enterprise customers, but it's critical now. So we are not going to get into the nuances of one question that may be on your mind, what is edge? Because that's a whole panel discussion in its own. What I think we will do is share or offer the panelists to share their own unique perspectives, and from that you can gather and glean what the edge really is going to mean in the future. So with that, I'm going to sit down and we're going to get going. The first question that I have for all of the panelists, and what I'd like you to do is to first address what your organization sees the opportunity for edge computing, some of the early use cases that you're already, or you may be engaged in or you think are important, plus some of the key trends that are there, and maybe address a challenge or two if you believe that they're relevant. So, Royce, do you want to get started?
Sure, I'll get started. I'm Royce Thomas. I'm the Chief Business Officer for Control S Data Centers. We're an India data center company, and we operate in 5 core markets in India. And the edge opportunity for us is all about what everybody's heard recently is India is now the largest populated country in the world, and that's driving a huge amount of need for edge computing and for content to be delivered throughout the continent of India. And so the opportunity that we see is to expand beyond the 5 core markets that we currently operate in and into 20 new edge locations. And in India, those tier 2 and 3 markets are the size of tier 1 markets around the world. They're 4 to 8 million people in size, but we call them tier 2 markets in India. So the opportunity really is to extend our footprint, and this is happening in the industry, not just within Control S, to be able to deliver content at the edge to eyeballs, but also to deliver the applications that are needed with the data resident locally to businesses and consumers. So that's the opportunity that we see.
Thank you. Don?
Thank you. Don McNeil, Chief Revenue Officer at EdgeConneX. EdgeConneX operates 60 what I will call hyper-local and hyperscale data centers in 50 markets in 25 countries around the world. We began back in 2014 when our the first version, if you will, of EdgeConneX, we deployed 26 data centers in 24 months throughout the US. And really for us, that was to validate the thesis with regard to the proximity of content and the consumption of the eyeballs. So we saw it back then as a latency play from the standpoint of being able to effectively transmit large amounts of data, i.e. through a CDN perhaps, but then also get it closer and closer to the eyeballs. Since then, we've watched, driven a lot by the cloud adoption and more software entering into the network elements in a more significant way. We see the future continuing to be obviously the consumption of content, but equally now the performance of applications that also become more and more latency sensitive.
Good morning. My name is Akio Sugeno, VP at KDDI and Telehouse. As you know, KDDI headquarters in Japan. We are one of the largest cell phone provider in Japan. So we provide, we are looking for the edge computing business opportunity. We do have a test bed in Tokyo and actively evaluating all the options. Also, Telehouse KDDI America, we provide a connected car service in the US market. And our customer currently includes Toyota, Lexus, and Mazda. As of March, we support a bit over 6 million vehicles in the US market. So to provide for like a future automated vehicle or autonomous vehicle, edge computing is a must-have technology to going forward. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. I'm Aaron Russell. I support our global edge team at Meta. I've been at Meta for about 9 years now, since the inception and kind of infancy of our edge network. When I think about the edge kind of computing opportunity today, if you kind of go back, rewind 25, 30 years ago, there's really been kind of a couple of major inflection points in internet infrastructure. You could say the first being the internet browser, of course, and then you think about the second being the iPhone. This third wave is more about AI, along with kind of AR and VR applications, and that's really driving a need for ultra-low latency requirements, where we need to penetrate the edge deeper in Tier 2 and Tier 3 markets, where we're deploying this edge cloud kind of infrastructure and focusing a bit more on our graphics processing unit strategy. So working kind of globally to extend our edge in places where our data center regions cannot.
Great, thanks, Aaron. My name is Cole Crawford. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Vapor.io. We are a cloud down connectivity as a platform company. By cloud down, I mean we are software defined, software driven, with the goal of autonomy and orchestration built into the network and built into the fabric and the physical infrastructure, allowing companies like Meta or others that have a first party need for a data plane and a need to distribute workloads around for whatever that reason might be. And I think, I'm glad, Aaron, you said what you said, because the only person up here that has any right to say this is what the edge is going to look like is probably you. Our job as infrastructure companies, the killer app at the edge is the same killer app as it was for the cloud, which is economics and easy button. Our job is to figure that part out, and that's what Vapor focuses on.
So you have it in terms of edge technology providers, edge users, both. That is indicative of the use cases for edge that we see. Now, one of the emerging trends that's on, well, I wouldn't call it emerging anymore, but one of the major initiatives for our entire industry has been the 5G global rollout. And when we look at 5G new radios on the existing core, well, that's interesting. But when we think about the emergence of standalone capabilities, SA capabilities for 5G, where we have the new enhanced core, now we have the opportunity for leveraging computing and connectivity into these whole range of new use cases. So the next question really is about how does 5G affect what, your thoughts on what your organizations are actually attempting to do? Is it orthogonal? Is it an integral part? And how do you think that your customers are going to be able to leverage a 5G integrated with edge computing universe? So I guess we'll start.
So India is in a unique place in terms of the 5G evolution. The license and spectrum for 5G was just done last year. And so right now, the wireless carriers are deploying their 5G technology, and that provides an opportunity in the infrastructure space for the edge data centers to support that 5G rollout. What hasn't taken place, and Cole and I were talking about this yesterday, is the spectrum for private 5G, which has applications for enterprise customers, manufacturing, healthcare, and et cetera. That is yet to take place. And so my perspective for the India market is 5G is going to drive an expansion of the data center portfolio, both from supporting wireless carriers, but also to enable private 5G when that spectrum is auctioned, which is supposed to happen this year.
Yeah, and private 5G is the next area we're going to talk about. So let's maybe restrain that
You didn't restrict me to
No,
private.
no, no.
public.
I'm just saying we are going to talk about private networking because I think that's a huge opportunity as well. So-
Yeah, if I could just jump in there, you know, look at anytime you have a company, a hyperscale company that gets opinionated about something like a packet core. In the instance of, you know, Meta, Facebook, they created Magma. Magma went into TIP. That migrated into the Linux Foundation. Anytime that happens, you know that there's more convergence and consolidation that's going to happen, specifically on the APIs and the technology stack, and with a big goal of democratization and openness. I think Open RAN is going to be a game changer in the convergence of wireless and wireline. And if you go back to, you know, I'm you know, semi-ex Facebook, right, from my days at Open Compute. And I remember when we moved into that building, we kept the Sun Microsystems logos at the bottom of the conference rooms. And the reason I bring that up is in 2008, Bob Gage from Sun said, the network is the computer. Now, if you look at the first-party services from hyperscale cloud companies, social media companies, it's mobile first, right? Instagram is mobile first, TikTok is mobile first, Snap is mobile first. It doesn't matter where the end device is now, that's what's generating data, which means in a 5G world, which let's back up. You know, 5G standalone is really compelling for fixed wireless, right? 5G standalone for mobility and CBRS and building macro networks with network handoff, and that's a different story altogether. But what the opportunity again is for us is to solve things like, where can the remote radio head live? Where, you know, what's the relationship between the antenna and the baseband unit, the CU-DU? And these are challenges that exist in the telco world network that do not normally exist in the wireline network, because the wireline networks have all been for humans, right? This has been at human speed. And as Aaron rightly points out, in the world of AI, you're now talking machine to machine, where things like, you know, front haul on a radio access network do require not milliseconds, but microseconds of latency. So the data plane, and again, the telemetry for a 5G network as it feeds into the wireline network, that is where our opportunity is in 5G. Again, being economic, because, and this is the last point I'll make, so in 4G, a round trip radio negotiation for a modem is about 60 milliseconds round trip. 5G, that's being brought down to about 5 milliseconds, but if you have 300 milliseconds of backhaul because of a BGP routing table, you've solved nothing for this entire industry. So I think it takes both the telcos with, you know, network slicing and some of the capabilities in like CBRS, unlicensed spectrum. It takes this convergence of wireless and wireline in order to build this world that we want to build.
Okay, so Don, do you want to?
Yeah, I think,
Come back
you know,
to-
to touch on some of the things Cole mentioned, you know, first and foremost, you know, it's the compute necessary for the radio access network. So, you know, we certainly see the infrastructure being very important. Number one, it's available. Number two, proximate, and therefore supports some of the latency requirements to fully take advantage of 5G. And then finally, you know, with 5G, the promise of 5G obviously is a richer set of applications, and therefore a lot more data generation, and therefore we allow for, I will say, more efficient, more timely, proximate data offload. So, you know, the infrastructure in the right place supporting 5G is how I'd summarize it.
Okay. So I believe the 5G technology is a must-have technology in the first place. Our company alone, we expect to support over 10 million vehicles by the end of this year. And I had a chance to meet with DOT, Department of Transportation, about 2 weeks ago. We started discussion of how to support public transportation under our platform. So we are talking to millions and millions, you know, vehicles. And 5G or a hyperscale mobile capability is a must-have technology to support in the future.
That's great. I'd like to take the question in a little bit of a slightly different direction, just to make sure we don't understate the importance of Wi-Fi and fixed networks. A lot of people like to talk about 5G and AR and VR applications within the same breath, but you know, 5G is critical, right? It's expected to be 2.5 times more efficient as 4G. But for many of the VR applications that we're looking at launching, they require speeds no more than low double-digit megabits per second, whereas in some 5G use cases, less than kind of 1 gigahertz kind of band, can support up to kind of 1 gig. So when you think about just kind of the traffic growth expected from some of these AR and VR applications, we don't actually expect those to change fundamentally physical kind of mobile infrastructure or the capillarity of kind of a mobile network. So fixed Wi-Fi is still quite important as well.
And if you think about how 5G is unfolding, 5G is a fixed technology for one thing, and it's a mobile technology. And also, 5G is this enabler. I mean, the long term with SA standalone capabilities, it's going to be the enabler for a whole range of use cases. It's not just about connectivity. It's not just about additional bandwidth. But lowering latency, like what Cole was talking about, is going to be quite significant. Now, Royce, you already brought up private networking, which is the topic of our next question. And if we think about taking wireless technologies, not just 5G, but as Aaron pointed out, Wi-Fi as well, satellite communications, because some applications need the coverage, and other technologies, and you actually marry it into edge computing. Now we have the basis, the infrastructure to enable this new world of private networking that is literally on the horizon. I mean, it's a huge market today. It's a $7 billion market based on analyst estimates, and it's going to be projected to double, triple within 4 or 5 years. It's very vertically specific. The question is to the panel, let's talk about maybe maybe you can expound a little bit or elaborate on what some of the private networking thoughts that your organizations have. Do you see the opportunities, and when do you see the opportunities? Is it a long term? Is it something today or something in between? So.
Sure, I'll continue with what I was talking about previously. Sure. What we're seeing from our enterprise customer base is they're at the front end in India of taking advantage of that capability in 5G, and in particular in the healthcare segment and manufacturing. There are other parts of the world where companies are deploying this already, and so India-based firms are looking at how they can take advantage of, in the healthcare business, with access to medical records and X-rays, for example, or in manufacturing, having IoT devices placed out through the manufacturing floor. The system integrators within India, the big guys, Infosys, Wipro, HCL, Tata Consultancy, are all deploying 5G outside of India for their enterprise customer base. And so they want to be able to do that within India. As soon as the spectrum is allocated, they will deploy those particular capabilities within the India market. So it's a huge growth opportunity, hence why you see a huge amount of investment coming from other data center providers into India. We've been in the market for 20 years now, so that's why we're extending our footprint. But it's a huge opportunity because we're at the beginning of that evolution, in particular with the 5G capability.
Yeah, I think one of the most compelling cases I've seen for private networking, a combination of 5G and Wi-Fi, and really the transmission medium is not as significant as the capability it brings. And this is in a automotive production facility. Historically, they would build Model A for so many months throughout the year, pause, reconfigure the factory, the production floor, which could take 3 to 4 months, and then begin producing Model B. Now with the introduction of 5G and in this case Wi-Fi as well, they're able to compress that time into about 2 weeks. So you think about the impact it has on that business with regard to production and the ability to collapse that dead time, really. That's been really the most compelling use case I've seen for private networking. And again, a combination of fixed and wireless from that standpoint.
Yeah, I'm happy to follow on. So we built the 5G network for the city of Las Vegas, but we did that for multiple reasons. And we're capable of doing this around the US in 36 markets with about 110 locations that are owner operated. In Vegas, couple of things that stood out to us as really interesting early use cases from a city perspective. So from like a first responder, public safety perspective, as an example, the police force is now able to wear Band 48 enabled body cameras and have that data. They use a cloud, I can't say which cloud, but they use a cloud. That data, though, needed to stay in that cloud within that county. So all the data being generated off the cameras needs to stay in Clark County. It could not take a route up to where that, the region of the bigger data center, the extension was. So we came in and sort of helped with some physical infrastructure there. But more importantly, that same antenna, that same radio could be used on a retail application using the same Band 48 unlicensed spectrum for a retail. So this is real, right? So there's a retail company, very large national US retail company. And anytime I'm in DC, I like to talk a little bit about my DoD background. So in the DoD, you talk about attack surface area and threat vectors. This is a big deal in the DoD. But retail and anybody that has anything exposed on the internet has to deal with the exact same thing. So this retail company, which is national but also has a presence in Vegas, they have about, in Vegas it's about 7 stores, but in some markets it can be upwards of like 15, 20 stores. Every single retail store is a data center. There's a couple servers, there's a couple firewalls, there's a couple routers, switches, et cetera. By looking at their problem, which they were a Wi-Fi environment, and they were looking at, to move off of Wi-Fi onto CBRS as a 5G standalone. By doing this, they were able to take 20 stores in one market, 7 in Las Vegas, and turn that down into running near-prem as a service with the same performance and security as they'd get on-prem, with the economics delivered to them as a service using radio access networks, using 5G. So instead of every data center being serviced, they looked at the data constraints, the bandwidth constraints, the latency constraints of their store, and were able to deliver the same use case, in fact, a superior use case to their customers, retail, SKU, supply chain, all of this from a massively consolidated number of physical footprints, meaning huge CapEx savings, OpEx savings, smaller attack surface area. So that economic use case is really compelling in the retail space today.
Yeah. So Akio, you want to talk about Telehouse's perspective?
I think the key word here is like a privacy. So in addition to DOT, I was able to speak with the transit agents, authority at like Ohio, California, Illinois, or other people, like 20, 30 people. And they all worry about like privacy, meaning no one can hack to data over the network. Plus, no one can reverse engineer and identify you. Where are you? That's the most important part. So I actually had a long discussion with Google researcher how we design, how you operate database every day. That's the most important part, I think.
And Aaron?
I think the only thing I'll add quickly there is that I'm actually excited about kind of this opportunity for kind of edge computing and 5G, and specifically because it's driving more need for investment in data centers. So, as multiple of my friends here on the panel are thinking about their long-term roadmaps, we get to kind of piggyback on that when we think about the tier 2 and tier 3 markets that we're trying to solve for, and looking at our kind of global expansion needs too. So it's kind of kills 2 birds with 1 stone, essentially allows us to think about markets that we otherwise wouldn't have kind of considered previously.
Yeah, I think Meta qualifies for a private network of a maybe unprecedented size. I want to take a pause here, though. Are there any questions? I think we have a microphone, and we'll take a question or 2, and then we can move on to the next line.
Hi, Mark. I'm Mel Velarde, chairman of the Now Group. On the Open RAN, for the clean networks, many enterprises require clean network connectivity globally. So we're looking at the core network as the main brain for Open RAN. How far behind is the Open RAN core, which is the brain? And answer that from the demands of the enterprise themselves, given their constraints, not just low latency, but really bringing the intelligence to the endpoints, to the devices. So I want to hear from you.
I mean, the beauty of Open RAN is it doesn't matter what core you're using. If you're talking specifically about a packet core, there are multiple to choose from, right? There's GXC, there's Athonet, there's JMA, there's Druid, there's a number of packet cores out there. Magma is a packet core. All of them with different maturity levels and sort of different profiles for why you might deploy that core. But the beauty of Open RAN is that you could substitute one core for another core, and because of the standard, if you're on, say, a 7.2, I'm sorry for those that are not technical, but if you're on a 7.2 or a 7.3 functional split in Open RAN, that's all going to work heterogeneously. This is exactly the network that Dish is building in the US. It's exactly the network that Reliance Jio is building in India, Rakuten is building in Japan. Is it behind like an Ericsson or a Nokia core? For sure, but it's also much newer. However, just like you've seen, Sundar very recently at Google say there is no moat for OpenAI, right? There's no moat that exists. Look at some of these like Llama-enabled AI language models, and the open version of these things are catching up very, very quickly. When you have the resources of Meta and everybody else that's focused on Open RAN versus a closed ecosystem, and I don't mean that the one's better or worse than the other, I just mean there is a finite number of problems to solve, and you've got a lot of horsepower powered by very large organizations that have a first-party desire to see these technologies catch up. It's catching up very, very quick. 7.3 is very close to what you'd normally see in a CRAN type deployment from a tier 1 vendor.
Okay, well, let's take a question that maybe centers on our theme of edge computing, and which we want to get back to that, which we'll be asking the panel some questions. So we'll take another question back there.
Anton Capella, sorry, AS1335. This is known as Cloudflare. Question for the whole panel. We're like 20% of the internet today by DNS zone volume. That's a lot of the internet. By bits, our last quarterly was over 197 terabits of capacity and utilization daily. I just would love to know how we're going to get any of this in MEC or similar platforms that I keep hearing about with Edge. And I speak from the point of view of having been a co-founder in a company called Edge Micro years ago. We tried it then, it didn't seem to hold a lot of water. So the challenge for me, working in this capacity, representing this autonomous system in the global scale of the internet at those capacities, is to even begin to think about where this capacity comes from to get closer, air quotes, to the edge. Can it be your metal? Maybe it could, maybe it couldn't. But again, we have this network deployed, over 300 data centers globally, hundreds of edge locations, if you will, already. How do I get close to that? Can I get closer? And if I could, why couldn't I just do this with the internet? Why can't I get the mobile edge, if you will, to just BGP peer with us, like the internet does with the top 10,000 other autonomous systems in the world? Thank you.
Wow,
I can take this if no one else does. All right.
Actually,
all right. So and Anton and I go way, way back. So let me give you I'll give you a real example. So I live in Austin, Texas. And let's just use LinkedIn as an example. So LinkedIn runs on top of Azure Front Door. So Azure Front Door is owned by Microsoft. I'm going to tell you my packet path, right? So I get an IPv4 address in St. Louis, Missouri, because my telco is not a baby belt. There's no central office, so I take a CIPRI connection actually all the way back to St. Louis, Missouri. Now, St. Louis, Missouri does not have AMS-IX, it doesn't have an OpenIX, it doesn't have DKIX. There's no carrier hotel in St. Louis, Missouri that is peering with Azure Front Door. So I go over to 55 Marietta in Atlanta, Georgia. 55 Marietta in Atlanta, Georgia, Akamai is installed there. And sorry, Cloudflare is, I'm sure, I know Cloudflare is there as well. But LinkedIn doesn't use, they use some Akamai. Anyway, 25-30% of that request might be cached by Akamai. The other 70% is backhauling across the country to San Jose, California, and then back to me down I-10. And I don't think that's an efficient path of a packet. I think the whole opportunity, here's all that is to say, I think the whole opportunity is here. It takes wires to offer wireless, but it takes wires to offer more internet. I think what the big opportunity for wireless and wireline is to get out of this legacy concept of We need to backhaul to a carrier hotel, or we need to backhaul to a regional IX. We need more cloud and carrier hotels in a much more distributed way with the network directly attached to that with public and private peering available on that footprint. And that's the only way this gets solved.
I think just to follow up on that too, I think the relationship between content application providers and internet service providers too are symbiotic. Taking Cloudflare as an example, by my last stats, I'm a junkie, so you'll laugh at this, but I think you have 180 POPs, exchange traffic with 12,000 ASNs, pretty global network. Facebook as an example for Meta, we've been investing, I think, $100 billion since 2017, $32 billion alone in 2022, just to extend our edge and global network from a subsea perspective and fiber closer to where the ISPs can kind of break out to IP. And I think as we continue to invest deeper at the edge and other kind of MNOs and ISPs begin to extend their user plane functions, it makes it much easier for us to kind of keep that traffic local and continue delivering over 90% of that local over time.
Can I just ask you a clarifying question? Is it more around the capacity, the megawatts, if you will, the racks, the proximity thereof?
That's a great question. Let me put it in perspective for the crowd here. For Cloudflare to deliver to the North American region of the United States in particular is only about 2 megawatts of actual burned heat in all of the facilities. If you add us all up combined, you can get this from the docks. It's all out there. That's not a lot of power to run something like the second or third largest by edge agencies, by edges network, okay? So that's not a problem for us in that sense. Let me give you, for example, what is the problem to help clarify, I hope, more narrowly. The best peering out degree we can get is with T-Mobile US, and that's only 7 locations in the entire US. I'm not going to name and shame, but pick a random multi-service operator, big cable operator, we have 10 times that edge density in interconnectivity, multiple connections per state, if you will, for the average. People love to dish on MSOs, right? They're not keeping up, they're too slow, whatever, my cable sucks, if you will. But what I wanted to paint the picture to say is that mobile needs to catch up in this way. Cole feels it acutely, but to leave you with a final thought, if you're in Denver, for example, on AT&T or Verizon, the only IP edge you get to the internet is in Dallas-Fort Worth, somewhere around Infomart. That's not okay. And we can fix that. We can do things in Denver that, for example, the local MSOs already are doing. So if they can do it, what are we waiting for? Is my point here.
Yeah, I mean, just in our early days, we were driven a lot by the cable operators. So I mean, it's not going to exactly solve your problem, but it was through the collaboration of where is the best place to put the data center, and you're always going to be in the chicken and the egg cycle, right? Do I have the connectivity or do I have the content? And it's just a matter of working through that. But as we look back, 3-4 years, it's pretty robust in the locations that it's been deployed. So, I mean, there's no easy solution, right? At some point, there was only one major peering point for the internet, right? And eventually, it began and expanded and flattened, right? So
I am a little opinionated about this. I do think, Anton, and having done Edge Micro, the way data centers get built in support of any customer is through economies of scale. That's been the way all data centers pretty much get built. However, if you take a software approach to this, you can get arguably the same or better SLA if you're distributed enough and you don't mind whatever transport requirement will exist between the physical disaggregation of that infrastructure. Anton, I think your 2 megawatts turns into 200 megawatts with Constellation, which you guys just kind of announced. The AI and the workers it's public, man. It was on your blog yesterday.
Actually, Royce, I'm going to move on. I think there's another question. So we have a couple minutes left, so I want to at least touch upon the last. Was there one other question? Okay, thank you. And then we're going to wind down the panel because we're running out of time. Thank you.
It's a great panel, and the conversation has been deeply in the technology and the distribution of technology. We're International Telecom Week. Where's the real action at the edge? And we've talked about the technology. Where is it? What are the use cases? Why should every company, every enterprise be demanding access at the edge. What are the reasons? I'm a marketing guy, so sorry, I do know technology, and I was at Sun Microsystem when we named it the Edge. I would still know Scott McNeely personally, so it made me feel good to hear my old company's the slogan. I also named Solaris, so we go way back. But I want to know, what are those use cases that those of us that sell this stuff goes out and tells the customer, great, I know I need it nearby, but what am I going to use it for? Why is it going to make my business better? If you can answer that question, you will have answered the question at the top. Where's the real action?
Royce, do you actually?
Yeah, I mean, I would summarize it up as performance, and the fact that whether you're an enterprise, so lots of adoption of software-defined wide area networking in conjunction with security. So again, if you're too distributed, too far away from the end user, in this case, the device sitting on the premise, you need proximity for performance and latency.
And
I would just add to it that it's about all the applications that are latency sensitive and where they're housed, and that's driving the extension of the edge. And so whether it's in healthcare or manufacturing or content or AR and VR, it's the application that's driving the need for the extension of the edge.
I'd like to answer the previous question a little bit. So as of today, capacity or power only exists in data center side. So we're shifting the power to cell tower, but that's kind of a little bit away. And we need more locations. So I think we come up with some kind of micro data center concept. One of the idea could be each gas station could be a small data center because now EV is coming up. So the gas station has to get the power to get EV. So power is there, location is there. All you need is fiber. Then each gas station could be like a micro data center to support edge computing. That's my
All right, well, we're going to have to wind down. Our time is up, but I want to thank our esteemed panelists. Thank you very much for your insights. Thank you for attending. This is great attendance. Thanks for the questions, and have a exceptional remainder of ITW. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you. That was a great discussion, and thank you so much for all the audience questions. It's been really great to get some interaction. We've got our final sort of data center focused session after this one, and we're ready to kick off straight away with that. So if I could invite Alyssa and all her panelists to come to the stage now, we'll get rolling straight away. Brilliant. Okay.
You can totally leave the seat there, yeah. They're heavier than the normal. Absolutely, yeah. No worries whatsoever. It's okay. Thank you so much. Yeah.